When Daniel was 20, his parents told him something that would change his life forever. They said he was a burden, a disappointment, and that their family would be better off without him. That night, they handed him a suitcase and told him not to come back. For years, they lived as if he had never existed, until the day their business collapsed, their money disappeared, and the only person who could save them was the son they abandoned. But to understand how the son they abandoned became their only hope, we need to go back to where it all started. Daniel grew up in a house that looked perfect from the outside. His father owned a successful construction company that had built half the commercial buildings in their town. His mother was known for hosting elegant charity events and maintaining a reputation of flawless family success. And then there was Victor, Daniel's older brother. Victor was everything their parents ever wanted in a son. He was confident, charming, and naturally talented at almost everything he tried. At school, teachers praised him. Friends admired him. Even the neighbors talked about how bright his future would be. Every dinner conversation seemed to circle back to Victor somehow. Victor's grades, Victor's achievements, Victor's future role in the family business. Daniel sat at the same table every night, but somehow he felt invisible. Whenever he tried to join the conversation, the moment passed quickly. His father would nod without really listening. His mother would gently redirect the topic back to Victor. At first, Daniel tried harder. He studied late at night, hoping to impress them with better grades. He volunteered to help around the house. He even asked his father if he could visit the office one day to learn about the business. His father barely looked up from his paperwork. "Maybe when you're older," he said flatly. That day never came. As the years passed, the gap between the two brothers only grew wider. Victor thrived under their parents' attention. Daniel slowly learned to live without it. But the moment that truly changed everything happened when Daniel was 15. One evening, he walked into the kitchen late at night to get a glass of water. The lights were off in the hallway, and he could hear his parents talking quietly inside. He wasn't trying to listen, but then he heard his mother say something that made him freeze in place. "I just don't understand him," she said with frustration in her voice. There was a pause. Then she added the words Daniel would never forget. "Why can't he be more like Victor?" The words weren't loud. They weren't meant for him to hear, but somehow they echoed louder than anything Daniel had ever heard in that house. He stood there in the dark hallway for a long moment, holding the empty glass in his hand. Something inside him shifted that night. After that, Daniel stopped trying so hard. He stopped raising his hand during family conversations. He stopped asking his father about the business. He stopped hoping that one day they might look at him the same way they looked at Victor. Because deep down, he finally understood something painful. In that house, he wasn't the son they were proud of. He was simply the one they wished had turned out differently. And Daniel had no idea that in just a few years, his parents would make a decision that would push him completely out of their lives. A decision that would force him to leave everything behind. And the night that decision came, Daniel would walk out of his family's home with nothing but a single suitcase. But that night hadn't come yet. Not yet.
By the time Daniel turned 20, the atmosphere in the Carter household had changed. The once lively home had grown quiet, tense, heavy with something no one wanted to say out loud. For years, Daniel's father had built a powerful construction company. It had been the pride of the family, the foundation of their reputation, and the reason they lived in such a large house in the first place. But businesses, like fortunes, can change quickly. One failed project turned into two. Two turned into several. Investors who once eagerly called now stopped returning messages. Payments from clients came late or didn't come at all. And slowly, the cracks began to show. Daniel noticed the signs before anyone talked about them. His father staying at the office later than usual. His mother whispering nervously during late-night phone calls. Victor spending more and more time trying to prove he could handle the family business someday. But no one talked to Daniel about any of it. Just like always, he remained outside the circle. Then one evening, something unexpected happened. His father asked him to come into the study. The request alone was strange. Daniel rarely entered that room. It had always been a space reserved for business discussions and important decisions. When he stepped inside, his father was sitting behind the large wooden desk. His mother stood near the window. Victor leaned against the wall with his arms crossed. For a moment, none of them spoke. Daniel could feel something was wrong immediately. His father finally cleared his throat. "Daniel," he began slowly, "we've been thinking about your future." Daniel waited. Part of him wondered if this was the moment his father might finally involve him in something important, maybe the business, maybe the family plans. But the next words shattered that thought instantly. "We think it would be better if you started living on your own." Daniel blinked. What?" His father's voice remained calm. Too calm. "You're 20 now. It's time for you to be independent." Daniel looked toward his mother, hoping she might say something different. She avoided his eyes. Victor remained silent. Then Daniel realized something else. This wasn't a discussion. The decision had already been made. "We can't keep supporting you, not with everything going on." The words hit harder than Daniel expected. Supporting him? Daniel had never asked for much. He barely even spoke to them anymore. But now, suddenly, he was being treated like a burden they could no longer afford. "I'm still in school," Daniel said quietly. His father shrugged slightly. "You'll figure something out." The conversation ended just like that. No argument, no explanation, just a quiet dismissal. That same night, Daniel packed the few things he owned into a single suitcase. Clothes, a few books, and the small watch his grandfather had given him years ago. No one helped him. No one stopped him. When Daniel finally stood near the front door, he glanced back one last time. His parents remained in the living room. Victor didn't move from his seat. It was as if they were waiting for him to leave. And so he did. Daniel stepped out into the cool night air and closed the door behind him. He didn't know where he would sleep. He didn't know how he would survive on his own. But one thing became painfully clear as he walked away from the house he grew up in. For the first time in his life, Daniel truly had no family left. What he didn't realize yet was that the next few years would push him further than he ever thought possible. Years filled with struggle, failure, and moments where giving up would seem like the easiest choice. But those same years would quietly transform the abandoned son into someone no one in his family would recognize anymore.
The first year after Daniel left home was the hardest. He had no plan, no savings, and no one to call if things went wrong. For the first few weeks, he slept on a friend's couch, but even that didn't last long. Eventually, Daniel rented the smallest room he could find above an old convenience store on the edge of town. The walls were thin, the heater barely worked, and the room was just big enough for a narrow bed and a small desk. But it was his. To pay the rent, Daniel took whatever jobs he could get. He worked late-night shifts unloading boxes at a warehouse. Some mornings, he cleaned tables at a small diner before sunrise. On weekends, He helped a local contractor carry equipment and materials to construction sites. The work was exhausting. Some nights he came back to his room so tired he fell asleep without even turning on the lights. At first, Daniel felt something close to anger. Not loud anger, not the kind that explodes, but the quiet kind that sits inside your chest and reminds you of everything you lost. Every time he saw a father teaching his son how to fix something, every time he watched coworkers talk about visiting their families on holidays, that quiet anger returned. But over time, something unexpected began to replace it: focus. Daniel realized something during those long nights working at the warehouse. No one expected anything from him anymore. There was no pressure, no comparisons, no older brother casting a shadow over every step he took. For the first time in his life, his future belonged entirely to him. So Daniel started learning, not in a classroom, but anywhere he could. After work, he visited the public library and read books about business, finance, and construction management. Many of the books were old, but the lessons inside them were still valuable. He watched how contractors negotiated deals on job sites. He listened carefully when business owners talked about profit margins, budgets, and risks. Slowly, piece by piece, Daniel began understanding something he had never been taught at home: how businesses really worked. Years passed like this. Long days, longer nights. There were moments when things nearly fell apart. One winter, Daniel lost his warehouse job and almost couldn't pay rent. Another time, a small investment he made with his savings completely failed. But each setback taught him something new, something valuable, and eventually, opportunity appeared. It started with a small project no one else wanted, a small renovation job for an aging building on the outskirts of the city. Most contractors ignored it. The profit was small, the risk seemed high, but Daniel saw something different. He saw experience. He saw a chance. With almost all the money he had saved over the years, Daniel decided to take the risk. He hired a small team. He worked longer hours than anyone else on the site, and slowly, against all expectations, the project began to succeed. The renovation finished ahead of schedule. The client was impressed, and word about Daniel's work started spreading quietly through the local business community. Soon another small project appeared, then another, each one slightly bigger than the last. Each one pushing Daniel closer to something he never imagined when he first walked away from his parents' house with a single suitcase, a future built entirely by his own hands. But while Daniel was slowly building something new, far away, the family who once abandoned him was facing problems far bigger than they realized, and very soon, their paths would cross again. While Daniel was slowly building a new life, things were moving in the opposite direction for the Carter family. For years, Daniel's father had believed the company would recover. He told investors the difficult period was temporary. He assured employees that new projects were coming soon, but reality had already begun catching up with him. One by one, the remaining contracts disappeared. Banks that once trusted the Carter name started asking difficult questions. Payments that had been delayed for months were suddenly demanded all at once, and eventually, the truth became impossible to ignore. The company was drowning in debt. Victor tried to step in. For most of his life, he had been groomed to take over the family business. On paper, he seemed like the perfect successor, but running a struggling company was very different from inheriting a successful one. Victor made risky decisions, hoping one big project could save everything. Instead, those decisions made things worse. Within a year, the situation spiraled out of control. Employees began leaving. Suppliers refused to work without upfront payments. Even longtime partners quietly distanced themselves from the Carter family. The final blow came when the bank refused to extend their credit line. Without it, the company could no longer operate. The business that had taken decades to build collapsed in a matter of months, and with it, much of the Carter family's wealth disappeared. Their large house was sold, cars were repossessed, The comfortable life they once enjoyed vanished faster than they could have imagined. For the first time in decades, the Carter family faced something they had never truly experienced before: powerlessness. One evening, during a tense discussion about their remaining options, Victor brought up a name that hadn't been spoken in years: Daniel. The room went quiet. Their mother frowned slightly. "What about him?" Victor hesitated. "I heard something recently from someone in the construction industry." Their father looked up slowly. Victor continued, "There's a company that's been growing really fast over the last few years. They've been taking projects all over the state." Their father sighed impatiently. "And what does that have to do with Daniel?" Victor swallowed. "The company's CEO," he paused before finishing the sentence, "is Daniel Carter." At first, none of them reacted. The idea seemed almost impossible. The quiet, overlooked son they had pushed out of their home years ago, running a successful company? But curiosity quickly turned into disbelief, and disbelief turned into something even more unsettling. Because when they finally decided to look deeper into the company Victor mentioned, they discovered something undeniable. The business was real, profitable, expanding faster than many competitors in the industry. And at the top of it all was the son they once called a burden, the son they forced to leave with nothing. Suddenly, the situation looked very different. The Carter family had lost almost everything: their reputation, their business, their stability. But somewhere out there, the one person they had abandoned had built something powerful. And for the first time in years, Daniel Carter's parents began to consider a possibility they never thought they would face. They might have to ask him for help. What they didn't know yet was whether Daniel would even be willing to see them again.
The meeting was arranged through a short email. No long message, no explanation, just a simple request from Daniel's father asking if they could talk. For several minutes after reading it, Daniel simply stared at the screen. It had been almost 10 years since the night he walked out of their house with a single suitcase. 10 years without a phone call. 10 years without a message. 10 years of silence. And now, suddenly, they wanted to meet. Daniel already knew why. The construction industry was smaller than most people realized. News about the Carter family's collapse had spread quietly through business circles months earlier. He knew exactly what they had lost, and he also knew why they were reaching out now. Still, after a long moment of silence, Daniel typed a short reply. "You can come to my office tomorrow." The next afternoon, they arrived. When the receptionist escorted them into Daniel's office, the room fell into an uneasy silence. The office was large, modern, and filled with sunlight from the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. It was nothing like the small room Daniel had once rented above the convenience store. His father looked older, much older than Daniel remembered. His mother seemed quieter, her confident posture replaced with something closer to uncertainty. Victor stood slightly behind them, avoiding Daniel's eyes. For several seconds, none of them spoke. Finally, Daniel's father cleared his throat. We heard about your company," he said. Daniel nodded once. No pride, no bitterness, just calm acknowledgement. His father hesitated before continuing. "The truth is, things haven't gone well for us." That might have been the biggest understatement Daniel had ever heard. Victor finally spoke. "We lost everything." Another silence filled the room. Daniel simply waited. Eventually, the words they came to say finally appeared. His father leaned forward slightly. "We were hoping you might be willing to help us rebuild." The sentence hung in the air. Years ago, the Carter family believed Daniel was the weakest member of the household, the son who would never accomplish anything. the one they could afford to lose. Now they sat in his office, asking for his help. Daniel slowly stood and walked toward the large window behind his desk. From there, he could see several construction cranes rising across the city skyline. Projects his company was leading, buildings his team was creating, a future he had built entirely on his own. For a moment, memories from the past flashed through his mind. The cold night he left home, the small rented room, the long years of struggle. Then Daniel turned back toward them. His father looked hopeful. His mother looked nervous. Victor looked ashamed. Finally, Daniel spoke. "I will help you." Relief immediately spread across their faces, but Daniel raised a hand slightly before they could say anything. "I'm not doing it because we're family." The room fell silent again. Daniel's voice remained calm. "I'm doing it because I'm not the person you believed I was." He paused before adding one final sentence. "The difference is, I learned how to succeed without you." None of them had a response. And in that moment, the Carter family finally understood something they had failed to see years ago. The son they once abandoned had become the strongest one of them all. Sometimes, the people who doubt us the most are the ones who push us to become stronger. Daniel lost his family, his home, and the life he once knew. But in losing everything, he discovered something far more powerful: the ability to build a future on his own terms. And in the end, the son they once abandoned became the only person who could save them. What do you think? If you were in Daniel's position, would you have helped them? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy stories about betrayal, redemption, and unexpected comebacks, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this.